This episode is brought to you by the Marriage and Family Training Channel. Check them out online by clicking the link below. And now, Healing with Words. This is a very exciting episode for me. I have been doing this for now, it's been about a month and a half. And just for kicks, I went ahead and did a behind the scenes of the last episode, no, season 2, episode 3, I believe it was. And I did it behind the scenes to get people a feel. And then I posted this in YouTube, in our YouTube channel, which is the Marriage and Family Training channel. As of just a minute ago, we had, and this is less than a week, 157 views of a particular episode, which frankly just floored me. Because I was thinking, do we go with audio with Spotify? Do you go with video with YouTube channel? Either or. And my bride and I were talking about it, and she suggested, why don't you do both? And so we're going to do this. This is actually going to be going, the audio portion of this is going to be going on Spotify, and the video version is going to be available on YouTube, again, on our Marriage and Family Training channel. And hopefully we'll be reaching as many people as we can. And so it's very exciting for us to be doing this, and hopefully it'll work. And so today I'm going to, I guess, show my age, and I'm going to name a name of a director. His name is Ron Satloff. That's Satloff. Ron Satloff he has since passed, but he was a very prolific director during the 80s. And as I explained to you, I've had the opportunity of working with a number of directors, some for Disney, and Scorsese was one of the movies that I did. I didn't, not just to clarify, I was part of the second unit down in Miami shooting some B-roll, while Scorsese and all the A-listers were up in New York shooting the main scenes. But whether it was Disney or Scorsese or any other indie director I've worked with, pretty much each one of them is alike in some ways. They use same terminology. But there was one thing about the directors that hit me over the weekend, and I wanted to share that with you. And so I've chosen, of the directors that I've worked with directly, I've chosen Ron Satloff. Now, again, you may not know Ron Satloff, but he is one that, if you are my age, which is, I'm from the 1900s, then you may recognize some of the titles of some of the episodes that he directed. And so bear with me and go down memory lane with me. Ron Satloff directed episodes 4, McCloud, Diagnoses Murder, Perry Mason, Jake and the Fat Man, Zorro, the TV series, The Love Boat, Dynasty, Scarecrow and Mrs. King, Hunter, Hardcastle and McCormick, The A-Team, The Fall Guy, Magnum P.I., Quincy, M.E., Galactica 1980, Charlie's Angels, The Dukes of Hazzard, Barnaby Jones, and the original Hawaii Five-0. And after reading that list, honest to goodness, I want to go, so, do you guys remember any of those shows and the stars? Because after all, it was so far, so long ago, I can barely remember. But when I found out that Satlov had somewhat retired and was living down here in Florida. And he was hired to do a TV show, which lasted just, well, they did season one and one episode in season two of a TV show called Condo Cops. And so um, I had auditioned for an old elderly man, and Ron kind of looked at me, and basically I didn't fit the bill. But I ended up getting an email, or sorry, a message from his secretary saying that he was saving me for something special. And so that was season two, episode one. And unfortunately, that was the last episode that he did before he passed. But I was very nervous about working with this renowned, director. And I remember that in this one particular scene, we had gone to a particular condo, and the story was they were telling stories of interesting, unusual, funny, or scary stories about, mostly funny stories about the world of owning property and owning condos. And I was playing the cop in this one particular scene where a man had passed away, and they found his body, except he was a hoarder. So the whole apartment was, it was just filled to the brim with just stuff. So I remember going over to the location, and I was handed my costume, and so I was going to go ahead and change, and I was shown where we were going to be shooting, and so I was taken to this condo, and guys, as I went into the condo and opened the door, there was junk everywhere. And it was clearly like 4 or 5 feet tall, and there was just a passageway from the entrance to the door to a bedroom and to a bathroom, and then down the hallway. And I think there was an entrance, just a pathway to the kitchen, but everything else was just packed. And like I said, about 4 feet tall, full of things. And I remember going in there and looking at it and saying, wow, the prop department did a fabulous job, getting this condo cleaned up and looking like this. And so as I was talking to the other co-stars and to the producers, because I was going to talk to the director, they told me, no, this is where the guy passed away. And so I took a second look, and I looked around, and every single can, every single newspaper, every single piece of paper was there, and it was original, and it belonged to this guy. And so it became more meaningful, because like, wow, I'm like in the scene of a crime. But and so I asked, why is all this there, and that you haven't cleaned it up? And they said, well, they were waiting for relatives to come in from up north to find out whatever it is that they wanted, and what they didn't want, then they were going to go ahead and clean it up. And so I got into costume. They had a wrangler with uh, uh, pet rats, I guess, and they were going to be shooting some rats just going, and moving among the trash and whatever. And the handler, the owner of the trained rats, was there to do that for the camera. And this one particular scene, I'm guarding the condo, and the actual owners of the condo, who were playing as the stars, approach the condo. And of course, I don't know who they are, so I stop them on the tracks, and this is what's going on, and say, hey, look, there was a death in here, but you guys are not allowed. And then explain to me the fact that, well, they are the condo owners, and so, could I give them more information? And so I pretty much had about 2 or 3 lines after that, and then they go in. And of course, we had other scenes, and the EMS coming in and taking the body away. We're shooting this one particular scene, and I had, like I said, I'm stopping them one line, and then they come back to me to feed me a couple lines, and then I go ahead and finish off with my 3 lines, let them through, and that's the scene. I recall that the stars or the owners of the company that were financing the TV show uh, were making a few mistakes here and there. And Satloff, sitting in his director's chair, and he actually had a director's chair, sitting in his director's chair, would say like "cut," and then he would go ahead and the stars are like okay, and they flub the lines or whatever. And I remember that in one of the takes, I delivered my first line fine, and then when it came to my other 3 lines, I think it was either the second or the third line that I did not deliver it well. I may have forgotten or I may have added a word or whatever. And I hear this cut, and Ron Satloff, popular director, gets up off of his director's chair and starts walking towards me. Now, at that moment, I'm like, holy cow, what is this guy gonna tell me? Is he gonna fire me on the spot? I mean, and so he's looking right at me and is walking towards me. And I remember swallowing hard and I'm shaking in my boots. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I got the director angry. What's he gonna say? And he looked at me, and just before I tell you, my stage name is Will Cruz, Will Cruz, and so I am on IMDb. And so if you look up for IMDb for Will Cruz, I think it's like 3 or 4 of the actual 11 movies that I've done are listed, and none of the TV shows I've done are listed there. And I think I've done like 7 TV shows, and I've done theater and voiceover. None of that stuff is there. I wasn't interested in populating that particular IMDb, and what was there is what directors and producers willingly added. So going back to this story, Ron approaches me and he looks at me, and the man is probably in his 70s, maybe 80s, and he looks at me and he says, "Will?" And I remember, I'm like, "Sir?" And he said, "It's not a lot of lines." And I said, "No, sir." And then he just turned around and he walked away. And so one of my claims to fame is the fact that I was reprimanded by famous director, Ron Satloff. I don't know if he ever did this with the Fall Guy or people from the A Team or Magnum PI or whatever, but I got reprimanded by him. Now, why am I saying this? Because over the weekend, I was thinking about in the movies and TV series that I have been, there are a number of terms that directors use um, when it comes to giving directions. And one of the things that dawned on me is the fact that the directors know what they're dealing with. For example, they have time is money. They're spending thousands, maybe millions of dollars, depending on the production, per day to shoot a particular scene. In one of the Disney films I did, I was at it was for the Tomorrowland. Um, I was supposed to be at a park across from or near Cape Canaveral for this one particular scene. And I remember having to be there either 5 a.m. or 6 a.m. and to go through hair, makeup, and wardrobe. My character's name was called the Birdman, and I was going to be feeding birds or something like that. And they rewrote it and they changed it. But we didn't start shooting until the middle of the morning, and we were not done till, well, after they gave us lunch, and it was great lunch. We're not done until around 3 o'clock. We were supposed to be there till 6, but at 3 o'clock we were doing shooting, looking at 6 hours ish, without the lunch or whatever. At least 5 hours, maybe 6 hours of shooting a 5 second scene in the movie. And it was an over the shoulder shot of me, and I'm looking at the star, the female star who's riding her bike. And again, that scene was shot over and over and over and over and over again. And each director has different commands, and some of them just say cut, others say, hey, let's do it again. or whatever. Uh, Someone say cut, check the gate. Again, it all depends on the director. But I was thinking about these three phrases I want to leave you with, and that is uh, cut, reset, back to one. Cut, of course, will in the language means no, stop the camera. We're gonna no, we don't want to film anymore. Reset talks about let's go ahead and reset everything. The sound, the lighting, everything, any props that anybody may have moved have to be reset and placed. Back to one means if you have people who are crossing, the background extras who are crossing in front of the camera from camera right and camera left, and people stop and pick stuff up, and the talent, which is the name of the stars, talent comes in from a door particular, a particular place, a hallway, or whatever. Uh, Back to one means everybody goes back to the first, to square one, to where the first where it's supposed to be from the beginning of the scene, and then when he yells action, then you go ahead and do that. And when it comes to a particular scene, you may have 7, 8, 10, 12 different times when the director says cut, reset, back to one. And what I noticed is that directors usually do not do this angrily. It's just very matter of factly. And it dawned on me over the weekend, like I said, that when a director is directing a particular movie, we'll go in a movie. He's directing a particular movie. He wants to tell this particular story, and he wants to tell it well, because he's looking at the end game, which is when they flash the end and then the credits. And when he gets to that point, he wants to be able to say yes, and he wants a reaction from the audience who are coming in to see the movie. Dang, wow, that was a great movie. And so he has to be mindful of every single scene. Every scene, whatever you see on the screen, is there on purpose, unless it's a blooper. Now, but for the most part, 99% of everything that's there is there for a reason, because it's been placed there by the directors or the producers. And so it's serving a particular purpose. But the director knows that in order to get, to put all of these scenes together and get to the final product of a marvelous, awesome story, he is dealing with a number of variables and factors. He's dealing with talent that may have been partying last night and are probably going to be late, which is going to cost them money. Or the talent forgets lines, or they improvise when they were not supposed to. They have to deal with background extras, for example, who the one cardinal sin is you never look at the camera. And if any particular background looks at the camera, of course, cut, reset, back to one, and that background may either be dismissed or whatever. And if the director is dealing with children, for example, or dealing with animals, or cameras whose batteries run out, or light bulbs that don't flash, or they just burn out during the scene, or the sound recording that just doesn't do it. I mean, there's just a number of variables, and so the director takes into account and understands that somebody is going to mess up somewhere. So he has to be ready and patient and graceful to understand that he may say, cut, reset, back to one, dozens of times, a day in order to get that scene right. But he knows that. And in my history of the 10 years that I was doing this, I never saw directors just losing it and be throwing things or whatever. They were just very matter of factly, cut, reset, back to one, and everybody marches and they do it, and we do the scene over and over again until he's happy. And then I thought, If we had that same attitude with our spouses, how different would our lives be? If we knew that they were human, they were going to misstep, they were going to forget things, they were going to make regular errors or whatever, flub something, uh, if we could have that same grace with our spouses, how cool would that be? And I remember my spouse and our children, my bride and my children would sometimes get into a tete-a-tete, and they'd be going at it or whatever, and they realized that they weren't going anywhere. They were not getting anywhere when it came to this, and so they came up with this thing that they called do-over, and whichever one was involved in that conflict could just say, "Hey, look, can we have a do-over?" And the do-over would be that, okay, fine, let's just forget that what happened before and let's just try this again. And that saved us so much, so many arguments and so much conflict. Now I thought, wow, the do-over is basically what the cut reset back to one is. Let's just go ahead and do it over. A healthy marriage is one that is filled with these cut, reset, back to one moments in your life. Why? Because you are committed to the end of the story. The end of the story is celebrating your 60th or your 70th wedding anniversary. You know, it's till death do you part, and where you, I don't know, you might both die in bed, you know, during hospice, you know, holding hands or just holding each other. I mean, and for that scene to say, to let people know, wow, this couple really, really loved each other. That's that's the end of a beautiful story. And so if that is what you guys as a couple are working towards, then when it comes to the different scenes, you know, play them over again. You know, just call it either do over or a TIFTT, you know, take it from the top, or a cut reset back to one if you're into movies, and say, hey, look, can we do this scene again? You know, and then just go back to one and you try that again with the new information that you have. And if you need to rewrite the scene, come on, how many movies have rewrites? It happens all the time when it comes to movies that you in order to make the scene better, you go ahead and have a rewrite. And so do the scene over again, you know, and work on that resolution and on working together. So take this attitude upon yourself as a couple. You know, cut, reset, and back to one yourselves into a thriving, precious marital relationship. I'm Bill Cruz, and this is Healing with Words.